Hi, I'm Katie, and you're listening to Learning Out Loud, a podcast where history isn't just about the past, it's the key to understanding today. We're switching it up this week with a little bit of a lighter story because I feel like we could all use that right now. This is also our first episode in our next series, Alcohol and History, where we'll be talking about different historical moments or figures and how alcohol was involved. Let's get into this week's episode, and I'm actually going to let Dan Coughlin, a sports writer and TV broadcaster, set the scene for us. He wrote, "There were 25,134 fans, 60,000 Genesee beers at 10 cents each, 50 cops, 19 streakers, 7 emergency room injuries, 9 arrests, 2 bare moons, 2 bouncing breasts, 1 sports writer punched in the jaw. It was the perfect storm. If they ever make a movie out of it, George Clooney will have to play the lead." End quote. Yep, we're going to be talking about Cleveland's infamous 10-cent beer night, which happened on June 4th, 1974. This is probably one of the most chaotic baseball games ever, but if you're not from the Cleveland area or aren't into baseball, you might not have heard about it. But don't fret, that's why I'm here. Ready for some ASMR? Hopefully this works. And yes, I was able to find some Genesee beer out in California. Tonight I'm drinking their cream ale. So grab your beer or drink of choice and let's go back to where it all started. So I actually heard about this story on a couple different podcasts. My Favorite Murder, episode 366, and Ladies and Tangents, episode 246. And there's also a Sports Center feature article. And the rest of my sources will be in the episode description. Let's get ourselves back into the summer of 1974. What was going on? Since we're talking about baseball, let's start with some of those milestones. Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's home run record in April, only a few months before this infamous night. This was very significant because Hank Aaron was African American and received many threats and hate because many racists were big mad that he was going to break Babe Ruth's record. And yes, this is in the 1970s that people were upset about this. Politically, the Watergate scandal was ongoing, and Nixon would end up resigning in August of 1974. The Vietnam War was also still going on despite the Paris Peace Accords and the U.S. withdrawing its combat troops. Specifically in Cleveland, they were experiencing an economic downturn due to decline in key industries, population loss, and a financial crisis. They were also dealing with the embarrassment of their river, the Cuyahoga, catching on fire. Yes, their river caught on fire due to pollution in 1969. This, along with racial issues stemming from integration, Cleveland began being called the mistake on the lake. This river fire contributed to the creation of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Clean Water Act. But anywho, now that we've set the stage, let's get back to baseball. Cleveland's team is now known as the Guardians, but at the time they were called the Indians. Native American groups had been trying to get the team to change its name and mascot for decades, but guess when the change happened? You got it, 2020. Fun fact, they moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan in 1899 and were called the Grand Rapids Furniture Makers. This is one of the older teams of the MLB. Their new name comes from the 1932 Art Deco sculptures called the Guardians of Traffic that are on Cleveland's Hope Memorial Bridge, which is across from the field. The beer's hit me. I'll leave that in. And I can put some pictures of those in the Instagram post for this episode. On June 4th, 1974, Cleveland's record was 24 and 25. There were 24 wins, 25 losses. So not great, but not terrible. Spoiler alert, they would go on to finish the season with a 77 and 85 record, which was 5th out of 7 for their division. And if you're wondering, the Oakland A's beat the LA Dodgers in that season's World Series. Not really important for the story, but it's always nice to hear about the Dodgers losing, am I right? Cleveland was not doing so well, and not surprising, they weren't really getting many fans to show up to watch their mediocre season. According to my great source, Wikipedia, the stadium at the time had 70,000 seating capacity, but they were only averaging about 13,000 fans per game. So what does the marketing team do to draw a crowd in, you might ask? Well, they sell beer for 10 cents, of course. And they succeed because they get 25,000 people to show up to the game. They upped their normal security of 32 guards to about 48 to 50 and thought, hey, that'll be enough. Spoiler alert, it was not. And for reference, having a 10-cent beer is like having a beer cost 64 cents in 2024. 65,000 beers were sold that night, and a Cleveland spokesperson estimates an average crowd today consumes about 23,500 beers. And so for $1, you could buy a bleacher ticket and 5 beers, which is wild. And the other wild thing about this whole thing is that this wasn't actually Cleveland's first cheap beer promotion night. They had actually done a nickel beer night, so even cheaper, in 1971. But with inflation, just a few years later, it got bumped up to 10 cents. And then the Milwaukee Brewers were also known to have a regular 10-cent beer night, which, they were the Brewers, so it's not really shocking. And I would argue the most ironic part of the whole cheap beer nights is when the Texas Rangers hold a 10-cent beer night on May 29th, 1974, against Cleveland. This is actually where the real story begins. So let me tell you about it. Okay, so here's what goes down in Texas. I'm going to try to keep it not super baseball-y for our non-baseball friends. In the 8th inning, out of 9, a Rangers player named Lenny Randle bunts down the first base line. The pitcher, Milt Wilcox, starts to run to get the ball, which has him running to the first base line with the batter, and they're kind of trying to race each other to get to first base. On the way, the Rangers hitter, Randall, body checks the pitcher because he was still mad at the pitcher for throwing too close to him earlier in the game. Baseball used to be a little bit more hands-on and a little rougher than it is today, so I wouldn't say this is necessarily out of left field. Yeah, so the Rangers player basically lets the pitcher know, hey, I'm still mad at you. So I'm going to body check you right as I'm running alongside you. This clears the benches, and multiple players from each team start fighting each other. And this being 10-cent beer night and the second to last inning of the game, the fans are in the mood to join the melee. They start throwing hot dogs and beer at the Cleveland players. The umps eventually get things back under control, and surprisingly, no one is ejected from either team. The Rangers go on to win the game, and afterwards, a reporter asks the Rangers manager, Billy Martin, if he's worried about vengeance from the Cleveland fans, being that they're going to be playing them again the following week in Cleveland. And Martin responds, quote, "They don't have enough fans to even worry about," end quote. And this gets out to Cleveland, and it actually pisses them off. And one particular Cleveland radio sportscaster, Pete Franklin, spends the entire week leading up to this series stoking the fire and amping everyone up for the rematch. So now we arrive to the infamous 10-cent beer night in Cleveland. And side note for all the astrology girlies, June 4th, 1974 was a full moon. And I don't know what the facilities management and front office staff were thinking, but the promotion was not set up very well, which is also interesting. Like we said, this was not their first time doing it, so I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the full moon. Who knows? They had to have known that the 10-cent beer night was going to draw a large crowd. Plus, they knew that there was beef with the Rangers and all that kind of shit talking going on. They had to have known that they were going to draw a significant crowd. But I digress. So here's the setup. There was a specific area where you could get the 10-cent beers, and it was ran by a couple of teenage girls. From what I read, it was limitless, but I don't know if that's how it was intended. But regardless, there was no way to track the number of beers people were getting, and it soon became a crazy rush and got out of hand. The teenage girls knew this wasn't going to end well, so they very smartly flee the area, and the beer dispensaries were now without any supervision, and the fans start to pour themselves beer. And who thought it was a good idea to put two teenage girls in charge of the beer without any security? I'm pretty sure that's illegal now for under 21s to serve alcohol, but I guess it was a different time in the 70s. The first incident occurs when a woman goes up to the home plate umpire during the game, flashes him, and then tries to kiss him. He declines, but it's viewed as kind of a, silly, lighthearted moment, and the game goes on. The Rangers take an early 5-1 lead, so that probably doesn't help the fans' mood. It escalates to throwing beer at the Rangers manager, Billy Martin, after he argues with the ump about a call. And he kind of furthers the situation by blowing kisses back to the fans. Then a young man runs naked onto the field and slides into second base as the Rangers player hits a home run. So this guy is running around naked while the game is going on. And I don't know about you, but sliding naked on dirt does not sound very fun. And then we have a father-son duo who runs out into the outfield and moons the fans in the bleachers. I mean, that's some interesting family bonding, but to each their own, I guess. It starts to get a little darker when a Cleveland player hits the ball really hard right into the stomach of the Rangers pitcher, knocking him to the ground. The crowd immediately starts to chant, hit him again, harder, harder. They also begin throwing hot dogs, like the Rangers fans did at the previous series in Texas. But then the fans start spitting at the Texas players. And then someone in the crowd brought fireworks with them, and they start launching them at the Texas dugout. And you wonder why we have to go through airport security nowadays to get into the stadiums and have clear bags. It's because of people like this bringing freaking fireworks. And not only bringing them, but launching them at people. It's crazy. Cleveland actually comes back in the 9th inning, and that's when shit gets real. It's the bottom of the 9th inning. Cleveland is losing 3-5, and this is their last chance to try to win. And then they actually tie the game. Later on in the 9th inning, they get the winning run on base, but this is when it takes the turn. A fan runs out and tries to take a Rangers outfielder's hat. So the outfielder ducks, but he also tries to kick the fan, but trips in the process. From the dugout, it looks like the fan is the one that knocks him over, and the Rangers manager is like, that's it, this is over. He rallies his team with some bats, and they charge the field to defend their players. This incites more fans to rush out onto the field, and some of them have knives, chains, and parts of stadium chairs that they have literally ripped out of the stands. Cleveland's own manager realizes that the Rangers are in actual physical danger and there's no security in sight, so he actually tells his team to grab bats as well, and they take to the field to help fight off the fans. One of the fans knocks the Rangers relief pitcher in the head with a folding chair, while others get into fist fights. As the chaos ensues, shout out to the organist. As the chaos ensues, the organist starts to play Take Me Out to the Ball Game, which I just think is very funny. Players are hit with everything from popcorn and cups to rocks, bottles, radio batteries, and more folding chairs. The stadium police who did try to stop the chaos had their caps and badges stolen. Some nonviolent fans take to the field and literally steal the bases off of the field, and they're never recovered. And you know there's some family in Cleveland right now with one of those bases proudly displayed on the wall. Eventually, a riot squad shows up and the riot is broken up. Around a dozen arrests are made. And the sad, ironic thing for the city of Cleveland and all their fans is that the home plate umpire calls it a forfeit for Cleveland, so they actually end up losing, even though they had a real shot at winning in the last half of the inning. By the way, the ump also got hurt, and he was a Silver Star and Purple Heart recipient for serving in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. Just to put that in perspective. Probably didn't think he'd be seeing this kind of fighting at home. A group of teens were standing on the Rangers' dugout, yelling for them to come out and fight. The reporter that I quoted at the beginning of this episode, Dan Coughlin, goes up to them and informs them the Rangers aren't even at the stadium anymore. One teen responds by punching him in the face. And that's when he said he knew it was time for him to get out of there. After the game, the Rangers manager, Martin, said, "Maybe it was silly for us to go out there, but we weren't about to leave a man out there on the field unprotected. It seemed that he might be destroyed. They would have killed him. I guess these fans just can't handle good beer. There were some knives out there too. We're fortunate somebody didn't get stabbed." Cleveland's team president, Ted Bonda, had a press conference the next day, and of course he was getting hounded by the press, like, what the fuck? And who thought this was a good idea? Where was the security, etc., etc.? He eventually throws up his hands in the air and exclaims, "Gentlemen, you're giving beer a bad name." Okay, Ted. And speaking of the team president, he calls in the two guys in charge of the promotional team to his office the next day. Their names are Jackie York and Carl Fazio, and they were both certain that they were going to get fired. Instead, Bonda told them he had booked them both flights to Milwaukee, where they were having their 10-cent beer night, and he said, go find out how they did it. And so that was the 10-cent beer night. So let's talk about some of the aftermath. They do, in fact, have another 10-cent beer night 1 month later, and guess what? It drew an even larger crowd. But fortunately, the promotion team took their trip to Milwaukee seriously, and the night goes off without a hitch. Also important to note, there was no full moon that night. They go on to have 2 more 10-cent beer nights that season alone. The infamy and lore of that night lives on in Cleveland. You'll still be able to spot a Cleveland fan with a 10-cent beer night shirt every once in a while. And in 2023, a Cleveland-based brewery called Collision Bend Brewing Company did a 10-cent beer special for the 49th anniversary of the game. They sold all of their beers that were under 7% ABV for 10 cents for 49 minutes, and with a limit of 2 12-ounce beers per customer. But sadly, baseball stadiums don't really do cheap beer nights anymore. It's actually quite the opposite, where they've all started competing against each other for who has the fanciest or craziest foods, which is another ploy to get people out to the games. Beer is like $15 now. I'd say I'd like to see a 10-cent beer night come back. So yeah, that is all I had for you for this week. Wanted to lighten it up a little bit, and I will leave you with this quote. Clevelanders wear their bruises remarkably well, and enough time has passed that the arrests, the late-night punchlines, and the forfeit are all viewed as a little more than hazy, quirky qualities of a hazy, quirky time in American history. And that was by Anthony Castrovintz from MLB.com. Stay tuned for next week as we carry on this Alcohol in History series. I'll see you then. Goodbye.